Hi everyone, welcome to the session. Let's look at the recap of what we have learned in the previous session. We have seen what are the different types of data types that are supported in Java, and we have also seen what are the different categories that are present in Java. One is primitive data types, and second is non-primitive data types. Within primitive data types, we have seen data types like byte, short, int, long, and we have also understood what are the different range of possible values that can be that are supported by each of these data types. And we have also seen data types like float, double to store decimal point values, and we have also seen data types like boolean as well as char. And apart from these primitive data types, we have also seen non-primitive data types like string, array as well as class. In this session, we will see how to read user input, and we'll also see type conversions. And there are two types of type conversions. One is explicit type conversion and other is implicit type conversion. Okay, so let's look at reading user input in Java. In Java, there are multiple ways to read user input. One is scanner class method, which is pretty commonly used, and other is buffer reader class method, console class method, and there are multiple other methods which are used in Java to read user input. And for the scope of this session, we'll be using scanner class, which is very commonly used in Java to scan input or read input from user. So first, to use the scanner class, we need to import the scanner class from java.util package. We have already seen what packages and how to import in case of Python. Similarly, in Java also, whenever you need to use a particular package, then you need to import it to use it. So here for us to use scanner class, we need to import java.util.scanner, which will again in turn be used to read input from the user. Okay, and this line should be at the top of the program file. Maybe we'll write this piece of code in the code playground once. Okay. So here at the top, we need to write import java.util. So scanner SE. So SE is the object variable where we want to store the scanner object that we are about to create. New scanner of system.in. Okay. So through this line, we are creating a new scanner object and we are storing it in the variable SE. Okay. Now we want to read input from the user input. Okay. So maybe let's say string person equal to SC dot. Okay. Next line of. So what this line does is, so from user input, it will read the overall line as a string. Okay. So what next line of method does is, like we have seen in case of Python, wherever we write input of, it will read the entire line as a string. So similarly, in case of Java, we can use scanner.sc.next line of to read the entire line as a string. Okay. Now we'll get to. Okay. So in the input, we'll provide Rahul space Atuluri as the input. And once if we try to print the value that gets stored in the person variable, again, you can see that whatever input that has been provided will be print as output. Okay. Now let's try it out in the code playground. Okay. So in the code playground, okay, we will give some input as Rahul Atuluri itself. Okay. Now let's run the code and see the output. Okay, so here we have provided input as Rahul Atuluri. So what happens when we are writing code sc.next line of is, it will read the entire output, entire input that is provided in one line as a string, and that gets stored in the variable person. And when we are trying to print the value that is stored in the variable person, so that gets printed as output. Okay, so this is what happens in case of Java. Okay, so apart from this next line method, so there are multiple other methods which are also provided to read multiple types of inputs such as integers, floats, doubles, and other things as well. So the scanner class that we are using right now, so we have used next line of method to read entire line of input as string. But there are, apart from that, there are also other type of methods which are also provided by this scanner class to read input as string or float or doubles and more. Okay, we'll look into what each of the what are the other types of methods. So next line of method is something that which we have already seen. There is another method called as next of. If we just want to read one word or a string which is delimited or separated by space, then we can just use next of method, so that only the next string value which is separated by space gets read. Or if we use next int of, then we can read an integer value. Or if we are using next float of, we can read a float value. Or we can similarly use next boolean of, byte of, short of, next long of, next double of to read a different type of value. Okay, so let's also look at it in using an example. So previously we have used next line of to read from user input the entire line as a string. Now here in this example, we are using next int of. So using next int of, what we can do is we can read an integer value from user input. That's the reason, because we are reading an integer value, we are again storing it in marks variable, which is again declared as integer type. Okay, so here sc dot next int of, that means we are saying that we want to scan or read the next integer value, and the integer value is read as taken as integer, and we want to store the integer value in marks variable. So because we want to store integer value, we need to declare the type of marks variable as integer type. Okay, let's try it out in the code playground. Okay, so here we'll give input as 100. Instead of next line of, we'll change it to next int of. Okay, instead of person, we'll change the variable name as marks, and instead of string, because we are reading an integer, we'll change it to integer. Okay, and system.out.println of, we'll also print the variable marks. Let's run and see the output. Okay, so this code will read 100 as an input and store it in variable marks, which is of data type int. And when we are printing, we can see whatever input that has been taken, we got it as output. Okay. Similarly, we can do it for float values as well. So we are giving a decimal value 4.5, and we are saying that sc dot next float of, that means we want to scan the or read the input as float. And because we are reading a float value and we want to store it in a variable rating, we need to declare the type of the variable rating as float. Okay, and similarly, whenever we are printing value in the variable rating, it gets printed out. Okay, you can try it out this in the code playground. Okay, and same is the case with next of. So when we mention next of, what it does is it doesn't read the entire line. It will only read one word. So how do we say one word? That means whenever there is a space, then until then it is considered to be one word. Okay. So in this case, if you have a look at it, so in the input we have given Rahul space Atuluri. So when we read sc dot next of, it will read only one word Rahul, because there is a space after it. So that will get read into sc dot next, and the value will be stored as string in the variable person. And when we are printing the value in the variable person, we'll only see Rahul. Okay, so next of will not scan or read the entire line, but it will only read the first word. How do we determine as the first word? So whenever we encounter a first space, until then only it will be read as the read by sc dot next of. We'll try it out in the code playground. Okay. So we'll give some input as Rahul space Akuluri. Okay. So instead of next int of, we will change it to just next of. And because next of will read as string, so we'll change the variable name to person. And because it is a string data type, okay, we'll keep change the type of the variable to string, and we'll print the same. Okay. So now let's run the code and see the output. So it should print Rahul as output. Okay. So assume if we also want to read the second word also, then what we can do is, like, we can change the code to string first name, okay, sc dot next of, then string last name equal to sc dot next of. Okay, so here also we can change system dot out dot println last underscore name. So now this code will read the first word as well as second word, because whenever we are writing sc dot next of, so it will first read the first word, which is Rahul, and then it will print the word which is stored in first underscore name as Rahul, and then in the line number 8 we are again calling sc dot next of, then it will go to the next word, which is Atuluri. Okay, and again the value gets stored in last name, and we are printing the last name. So that's why you can see the output. Okay. So as we have already seen, next line of reads the entire line as a string, whereas next of only reads the first word, which is delimited by space. Okay. So once we are done with scanning, then in case of Java, we need to close them. We need to call the close method. Okay. So what happens is, usually in case of Java, whenever we are creating a new scanner class object, so once we are done with reading, we need to call the close method. If we don't do it, then the resources which are allocated for this scanner method won't get freed up. So it's always a good practice, and it is needed in Java to call the close method once we are done with reading the input. Okay, so now let's try it in the code playground. Okay, so assume we are done with reading the piece of code. Okay, now let's call sc dot close off. It doesn't change any of our output, but it is a good practice that needs to be followed in case of Java. So once we are done with reading the input, so we need to call sc dot close off method, so that the system resources get freed up. Okay, right? So this is how we need to write sc dot close off, and we have already tried it in the code playground. It doesn't change output of the code, but it is a good practice to be done in case of Java. Okay, now let's look at an example of reading an array input in case of Java. Okay, so usually one thing that we are habituated to in case of Python is, whenever we have an input like this, 1 space 2 space 3 space 4 space 5, and if at all whenever we want to read it as a list, this is the piece of code that we usually write. So we'll scan input. It will take read all the input as a string. Then we use the split off method, and followed by that we convert all the strings to integers, and all the integers we convert them to list. So this is what we do it in case of Python. Okay. So in case of Python, we use input method, map method, and list to kind of convert this input array into a list. Okay. Now let's look at into how do we implement the similar thing in case of Java. So as we might have already seen, so in case of Java, compared to list, arrays are a little bit different. So in case of an array, all the elements in the array should be of the same data type. And second constraint is that arrays have a fixed size, unlike lists in Python. Whereas in case of lists in Python, so you can increase the size of the list or you can decrease the size of the list. But whereas in case of arrays, the size once it is fixed, you can't change the size of the array. Okay. So now assume we need to read different types of inputs. In the first case, we have 5 numbers. In the second case, we have 3 numbers. In the third case, we have like 8 numbers. So what size of array can we create in the code? Because we need to know the size of the array upfront. Otherwise, how do we declare an array? This is the problem in case of Java. Whereas in case of Python, you read the input, you use split off, and you convert all of them to integers, and you convert them to list. But whereas in case of Java, so for you to read the integer array, so you need to know the size of it, because the size of the array in case of Java is fixed, and you cannot increase or decrease it dynamically, right? So how do we declare what should be the size of the array, right? So this is one problem in case of Java. So the way to solve for it is, whenever there is an input array which is being given in case of Java, so there would also be another value which is provided, which talks about array length. Okay. So in Java, so usually whenever we are solving coding problems, the size of the array is also often provided as an input, and followed by that elements in the Java are provided. Elements in that particular array are provided. Okay. So usually whenever we are trying to solve a problem in case of Java, so it's a usual practice to provide length of the array followed by elements in that particular array, because in Java array size is fixed. Okay. So now let's take an example and solve a coding problem. Okay. So assume we have a coding question or a problem solving question. We need to write a program that reads user input and prints the square of each of the integer. Okay. So in this case, the input is given as, in the first line, there is an integer 5, which says that the number of integers that are present in the next line, which means elements in the array. Okay. And we need to output all the square of those numbers as an output, which is again space separated. So in this case, input is given as 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And we need to print the output 1, 4, 9, 16, 25. So square of the number should be printed as output. Okay. So in the input, the first line is given as the size of array that needs to be created, or the number of elements that are present in the next line. Okay. The second line contains all the elements that are to be present in that particular array. Okay. So as we have already seen, first line contains integer that represents the number of integers that are present in the next line. And so to do that, first of all, what we need to do is, again, we'll have to use the scanner class. Again, first we'll have to create a scanner object. Followed by it, we'll have to use next int of method, so that we can scan what is the size of the array that, or the number of integers that are present in the next line. So we'll have to scan the size of it, or read the size that is given in the user input using sc.nextInt of method, and store the value in the variable size. So once we know the size of the array, then what we need to do is we need to create an array with that particular size. So we can also test the piece of code to see what's the output, what's the input that was given, and we can print it out to see if we have scanned or read the input properly. Okay. So we'll try to write the piece of code that we have seen so far. Okay. So first, in the input, okay, we will change it to 5 followed by 1 space, 2 space, 3 space, 4 space, 5. Okay. Now first we need to scan the size of it. Okay. We'll have an variable int space size equal to, okay, sc dot next int of. Okay. And we'll also see if we have read the input properly. System.out.println of size. Now let's run the code and see if the output is as expected. So it should ideally print 5, because we are scanning the first line and the first integer that is present over there. Okay. So the output came out as 5, which is as per our expectations. Okay. Now what we need to do is we need to read all the inputs which are provided in the second line, which are space separated integers. Okay. So for that, first of all, we need to create an array of the size. So to create an integer array, we'll use int space int followed by the square braces to declare an array, and and the variable name here is num underscore sequence seq equal to, we need to assign an integer array, and we can assign values into that integer array at a later point. So to create an integer array of size, so we need to write new space int square braces, and we need to give the size. So whenever we give the size, what happens is a new array gets created with the particular size that was given as input to it. Okay. So once we are done with it, the next step that we need to do is we need to fill the array with the input which is provided as by the user. So for that, we need to traverse through the overall array. Okay. So we need to traverse from 0th index to size minus 1 index. So for that to happen, what we are doing is we are using a while loop. Okay. We are starting with index as 0, and while condition is being given as index less than size. So we need to travel till index equal to size minus 1. So at each of the index, we'll scan whatever integer is present in the input, and we'll fill it in the array. Okay. So to do that, so num underscore sequence of index equal to sc dot next int of. So what it does is, assume in the first step, when the index is 0, it will scan the first input which is given, first integer which is provided as part of input, and it is stored in the 0th index, and then we are incrementing the index by 1. So now in the second loop, so index will be 1, and now we are reading the second input which is provided, integer input, and then we are storing it in the index 1. So likewise we do it till the size minus 1. Okay. Now let's try it in the code playground. Okay. So here we have already read the size of the input. Okay. Now create an array. So integer array. Okay. Num underscore sequence equal to. Okay. We need to create a new array int of size. Okay. Then we need to write a while loop. So we'll also have an index variable int index equal to 0 while index less than size. Okay. So num underscore sequence of index equal to, okay, sc dot next int of. Okay. So now that we have read one integer and stored it in the array at index at the particular index, now index equal to index plus 1. Okay. So with this, we'll be able to close out on the reading of input. Okay. Now let's run the code. So it won't print any output because we are not printing any piece of output here. Okay. So now that we are done with reading input as well as creating an array, now let's look at into printing square of each of the integers in the given array input. Okay. So for that, again, we need to traverse through the overall array, and for each of the item in that particular array, we need to compute square of each of the numbers and print it as output. So for this, we will use for each loop in case of Java. Okay. So for int space each item, and we'll give the number sequence, and for each item, we need to compute square of it. So the way we compute square of it is each number multiplied by the same number, and whatever is the square value that we compute, we will print it out as an output. Okay. Let's try it in the code playground. Okay. So now that we are done with scanning of the input, so we will also call the sc.closeOf method. Okay. Now let's write for each method. Okay. For int each item. Okay. Num underscore sequence. Okay. We'll compute square of the number. Okay. Each underscore item multiplied by each underscore item. Okay. System.out.println of, okay, square. Okay. Now let's run this piece of code and see the output. Okay. So what we are trying to do here in this for loop is we are trying to iterate over each of the item in the particular array, and for each item we are computing the square of that particular number, and we are printing the square of that particular number. Okay. So here the input is given as 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 are given, and here in the output we can see 1, 4, 9, 16, 25, which are nothing but squares of the numbers which are provided in the input array. Okay. Now you can see one difference. So in the question that was given, so the input was given in a horizontal manner 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and the output is also space separated 1, 4, 9, 16, 25. So with the output of each square of each of the number, it is separated by using space. Okay. Whereas in case of the output that we have printed, it is separated by line. So every square of each of the number came out in a different line. Okay. So how do we print all of them in a space separated manner in Java? Okay. Let's look at into that. Okay. So whenever we are using println method, what we are trying to say is that print in, once the output is printed, add a new line towards the end of it. So whenever we assume if we want to print system.out.println of sun, that means what we are saying to, in Java is that, so once the sun is printed, add a new line towards the end of the output. Okay. So in Java, there is also another method which is called as system.out.printof. Okay. So if we just write system.out.printof, it doesn't add any new line. Okay. So it doesn't add any new line towards the end. Okay. So assume if we write a piece of code as like system.out.println of sun and system.out.println of flower, the way it prints is sun in the first line followed by adding a new line, and then it will print flower and then again add a new line. Okay. If you look at the code towards the right, where we are just using print off. Okay. So it first prints sun, and then we haven't, it will not add any new line, and then it will print flower, sun followed by flower. There is no space or new line in between. Okay. So this is the difference between println and print statement in case of Java. Now, so if we try to use, instead of println, if we try to use print, then what happens is all the square of the numbers will be appearing together in the output, because first 1 will be there and there is no space or new line. So again, 4 will be printed, followed by 9 will be printed, followed by 16 will be printed, and followed by that 25 will be printed. So all of them will appear together, which is not space separated, right? So how do we create space between each of the output? Okay. So for that to happen, okay, so to create the space, what we'll do is, after whenever we are printing square of the number, plus we'll also add an extra space. So we'll concatenate the square of the number with an extra space. So that will give the desired output that we want. Okay. So let's make the code changes accordingly. So here we have square of the number which we are printing. So to this we will add concatenate it with an extra space, and instead of println we'll just use printf method. Okay. Now let's run this code and see the output. Okay. So it should print 1, 4, 9, 16, 25 in a space separated format. Okay. So instead of println, we are using print, and whenever we are printing the value, so apart from the value, we are also concatenating it with an extra space. This is how we get the desired output in case of Java. Okay. Right. Now let's look at type conversions in Java. So in Java, what you can do is you can convert the value from one data type into another data type as well. So process of converting value from one data type to another data type is called type conversion. So you can convert between integer, floats, char, and other data types. There are basically in Java two types of type conversions among the primitive data types itself. There are, as we have already learned, there are two types of data types. One is primitive data types and other is non-primitive data types. So we are now going to look at type conversions among the primitive data types. And again, within this, there are two types of type conversions. One is explicit type conversion, or also called as typecasting, and second is implicit type conversion. So we will understand what each of these means. So in explicit type conversion, we as a programmers, if we want to change the data type of a value to another different data type, we need to explicitly mention how the data type should be converted. So this type of conversion is called as typecasting. Okay. So whenever we are writing a program and if we want to change data type of one data type of a value from one data type to another data type, so we will explicitly mention how to convert it. So this type of conversion is called as explicit type conversion, or called as typecasting as well. We will understand it using an example. So assume in this case we have a variable x which is declared as double type, and the value is also assigned, which is 5.6 decimal value. As we have already learned, whenever we declare a decimal value, whenever we create a decimal value, by default it is considered to be a double data type. So here we are assigning 5.6 decimal value as double data type to variable x, and variable x is also declared as double data type. And in the next line, so what we are trying to do is the value in the variable x, we are trying to convert it to integer. So this is called as explicit type conversion, because we are explicitly mentioning that in the round braces we have included integer data type before the variable name. So whenever we have a data type name enclosed in the round braces before the variable name, that means we are mentioning it to explicitly convert. So here we are saying that variable x, which is of double data type, the value in the variable x should be converted to integer data type and stored in variable y, which is again an integer data type. So if we print the output of the value which is present in variable y, we can see that the value will be 5. Okay. So we'll also understand what happens here. So we have already understood that 5.6 is a decimal value, and decimal value is being assigned to variable x, which is of double data type. So the value in x will be 5.6 in itself. Whenever we are trying to convert the double value to integer, the decimal portion of it will be trimmed. So in this case, the decimal portion is 0.6, and that will get trimmed. Only the integer portion of the decimal value will remain, which is 5. Okay. So this is what happens in case of whenever we are trying to do explicit type conversion between double to integer. Okay. Similarly, if we are trying to do a float to short conversion, again here we have given we have taken an example of variable x which is declared as float type, and the value that we are assigning is 12.5 f, which is added. That means we are also creating a float value, and in the next line we are trying to convert a float value to short value and store it in the variable y, which is again declared as short data type. Okay, so in this case also the decimal value 0.5 gets trimmed out. Okay, so only in the variable y only the value the integer portion 12 gets remain. Okay, so we can see the output as 12. You can try it out in the code playground as well. Okay, but a character also to integer. We have already seen in Python also each of the character has an value, integer value, which is called as ASCII value, something that we have already learned in Python. Okay, so here for character C, for the C variable we are assigning an character A, and in the next line we are trying to convert that character as a to integer and store it in variable D. Okay, so for capital A the ASCII value is 65. So whenever we are trying to do an explicit type conversion, the character value gets converted to integer value and will get stored in the variable D. Okay, so because we are explicitly specifying using within the round braces, we are giving the type of the conversion that needs to happen before each of the variable. This type of conversion is called explicit type conversion or typecasting. Okay, so you can try it out this as well in the code playground. Okay, similarly we can also convert an integer also to character. Okay, so in this case if you look at, we have given int m equal to 65, and in the next line so we are trying to convert an integer value into character value using explicit type conversion. We are doing it before the variable m, within the round braces we have given the type of data type to which it should get converted to. So here variable m, the value in the variable m is going to be converted to char data type and stored in the variable n. Okay, so whenever we try to print the value in the variable n, we can see character A being printed because ASCII value of character capital A is 65. Okay. So now that we have seen explicit type conversion, we'll also now try to understand implicit type conversion. Okay. So as the name says, in explicit you explicitly mention how it should be converted, whereas in case of implicit you need not explicitly mention how it needs to be converted. Okay. So Java compiler, what it does is whenever there is a primitive data type, so whenever a value is assigned to another primitive data type, it does the automatic process of trying to convert the value from one data type to another data type. So this is called as implicit type conversion. Okay. So in case of Java, so whenever there is a primitive data type, so when you assign the value of one primitive data type to another variable which is declared in another primitive data type, so Java compiler automatically tries to convert the value from one data type to another data type without you explicitly mentioning it. So this type of type conversion is called implicit type conversion. Okay, let's also try to understand it through an example. Okay, so in the first example we have an variable x which is declared as integer type, and we have assigned a value 10. Okay, in the second line we want to convert integer value stored in x variable to long data type and store it in the variable y. So because we have explicitly mentioned that using the round braces and providing the data type long before variable x, this type of conversion is called explicit type conversion or typecasting. Whereas if you look at the right side, so again you have an integer you have a variable x of integer data type and you have value 10 stored in it, and in the next line we are saying long y equal to x. That means the value stored in the x, we are asking it to assign it to variable y which is declared as long data type. So here we are not explicitly mentioning to convert the variable the value in the variable x to data type long, but what Java automatically does is it does the type conversion and it will store the value which is stored in variable x, it will convert to long data type and store it in the value variable y. Okay, so this type of conversion is called implicit type conversion. Okay, so this implicit type conversion normally occurs when a small data type is assigned to a large data type. Okay, so if we take an example, so a byte, which is the number of bits acquired here is like 8 bits or 1 byte, whereas in case of short it's 2 bytes, integer 4 bytes, long it's 8 bytes. So whenever a small data type, assume a short, B is being assigned to a long data type, which is like 8 bytes. So whenever this type of so integer can be automatically converted to long because integer is 32 bytes and long is 64 bytes. So Java does this implicit type conversion whenever we are trying to assign an integer value to a variable which is declared as long data type. Similarly, an integer can also be automatically type converted to float data type. Similarly, integer can also be converted to a double data type. So because in all these cases, integer data type is small and long, float and double data types are bigger data. Okay. And so we can also try this implicit type conversion in the code playground. So you can take this example. We can have x equal to 10, which is declared as integer. Then in the next line, when we are trying to assign integer value to a variable which is declared as long, then automatically the type conversion happens by Java compiler, and the value in the x will get converted to long data type and stored in the variable y. So if you print it out, then you can see the value which is stored in variable y. Okay. So similarly, you can do it for character to integer as well. And you can also, whenever you try to do an integer to char. So in this case, integer is bigger because it will take, much bigger size compared to char. C. So usually character means it is just 1 byte. Okay. So whenever you try to assign a larger data value to a smaller data type, then we will see an error in case of Java. Okay. So implicit type conversion doesn't happen from larger data type to smaller data type. It will only happen from smaller data type to larger data type. So in this case, int is larger compared to char. So this implicit type conversion doesn't happen in case of Java, and you will see this type of errors in case of Java. Okay, so you can try it out as well in the code playground. Okay, so as you can see, int is like 4 bytes, and whereas in case of char, it's just 2 bytes. So int is greater than char. So whenever you are trying to assign a larger than a char data type to a char, then this type conversion, implicit type conversion, doesn't happen. Okay. Now let's also look at different types of type conversion methods that are also present in the case of Java. Okay. So we have already seen how type conversions can happen between the primitive data types, right? So now let's look into how the conversion can happen between primitive data types as well as strings, which is pretty commonly used in case of Java. And we also have a lot of methods to do this. Okay, so we have already seen how the primitive data types conversion happens. We have also understood like what explicit type conversion and implicit type conversion is. And one of the most other frequently used thing in Java is converting the primitive data types to strings, and there are multiple methods which are already available in Java to do this. Okay, so some of the methods are string.value of, integer.parseInt of, character.toString of. So these type of methods are available. So we'll also explore and understand what each of these method does. Okay, so to convert primitive types to strings, so primitive types could be byte, short, int, long, or double, float, boolean, okay, char. All of these are like primitive data types. Now to convert them into strings, okay, so converting all these primitive data types to strings, we have these methods: string.value of giving a variable, or integer.toString of giving an integer value, or character.toString of giving a character value. So we'll try to use all of them now. Okay, so first look at string.value of. Okay, so now assume we have a scenario where we have an integer value and we need to convert it into a string value. Okay, so the way we do it in case of conversion between primitive data types and string data type is we'll use string methods. Okay, so this there is a method called string dot value of, and we need to give the variable name. Okay, so in this case we want to convert the value in the integer variable I. Okay, so we are using string dot value of I. So the value 123 gets converted to integer value 123 gets converted to string value and gets stored in the string variable s. And whenever we are trying to print the value, so we can print the value in the which is stored in the string variable s. We can print we can see the string output. Okay, now let's try it out in the code diagram. Okay, so we'll clear off the existing code. Okay, now we have int I equal to assume 123. Okay, now we want to convert this integer value to string. Okay, so we have string s equal to, okay, string dot value of. So we need to make sure that o is capital, and we need to give the variable I. Okay, system dot out dot println of s. Okay. So we'll clear the input as well, and we'll run the code and see the output. So the output should be again 123, but in the string format. So while in the output you will not be able to determine if it is a string value or not, but because we are printing the value which is stored in the variable s, here the variable s is declared as string data type. So you can assume that the value which is printed is a string data type. Okay. Similarly, if you want to convert a double value to string, you can use string dot value of. Again, you can give the double variable d, and again it gets converted to string, and you can see the output. Or if you want to convert a character to a string, again you can again use string dot value of and give the char data type variable, and it gets converted to string. Okay, so you can try out all of these things in code playground. Okay, now we also have another method which is integer dot to string of int. Okay, so if at all you want to convert an integer value to string, you can either use string dot value of and give the integer variable, or you can use integer dot to string of and give the integer value to it. Okay, so here again instead of string dot value of, or what's the change that we did here is integer dot to string of. instead of string dot value of, here we are using integer dot to string of method to convert an integer to string. Okay, rest all remains the same. Similarly, you can use character dot to string of char to convert a character to string. Okay, to convert a character to string. Okay, again in this case also, what one change that we did was string dot. Okay, so instead of using the string methods, here we are using character dot to string method to convert a character to a string. Okay, so again you can try it out in the code playground. Okay, so similarly there are multiple other methods also to convert strings to primitive methods as well. Okay, so so far we have seen how do we convert primitives to string data type. Similarly we have methods to convert strings to primitive data types. Okay, so we have like byte dot parse byte of string, short dot parse short of string, integer dot parse int of string. Okay, long dot parse long of string. Okay, so in all such cases string will get converted to primitive data types. So far we have seen primitive data types being converted to string. Now we are looking at strings being converted to primitive data types. Okay, now let's also look at them through few examples. Okay, so here we have a string s with value stored 123, which is again a string value. Now using integer dot parse int of method, now we are converting the string value to an integer value and storing it in variable I, and we are printing out the same. Okay, so integer dot parse int of method is used to convert a string value to an integer value. Okay, and get stored in variable I, which is again declared as integer data type. Okay, so you can also try this out in the code playground. Okay, so similarly if at all we want to parse a boolean value and which is present in the string and do the conversion to boolean value, then you can use boolean dot parse boolean. So here again in the variable s, string value true is stored in it. Now we want to convert it into boolean value. So for that we have used boolean dot parse boolean method to convert the string value to boolean value. Okay, similarly you can do it for the float values as well. Okay, right? So so far in the session we have learned about how do we